I want you to picture an empty auditorium seat. Not a whole empty row, just one seat, dead center, third from the aisle, with a little paper sign taped to it that said reserved in my own handwriting, because I'd asked the usher to hold it that morning, certain, foolishly certain, that someone from my family would show up before my name was called. My name is Simone Ardell, and I was 26 years old the day I graduated with my master's degree in structural engineering, summa cum laude, for years of night classes stacked on top of a full-time job. For years of skipped birthdays and skipped sleep and skipped everything except the goal in front of me. I looked for my mother's face in that crowd of 2,000 people the way you look for a lighthouse in a storm. I looked for my father. For my sister, Bianca. For anyone. That seat stayed empty the whole ceremony. I found out why 40 minutes later, standing outside in my cap and gown, my diploma tube still warm from being handed to me, when I finally got a signal on my phone and saw 11 missed calls from my mother, Denise, and one voicemail that undid something in my chest I didn't know could still be undone. Simone, baby, listen, we couldn't make it. Bianca had a dress-fitting emergency. You understand, right? You're so independent, you don't need us there like she does. Call me back, we need to talk about something important. I stood in that parking lot in 90-degree heat, sweating through my gown, and I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because laughing was the only thing keeping me from screaming in a crowd of strangers, proud families taking photographs all around me. I called her back. I always called her back. That was my sickness, if I'm honest, the compulsive hope that this time would be different. Simone. Finally. Okay, so, we've been talking, and Bianca's dream venue needs a $10,000 deposit by Friday, and your father, and I just don't have it right now, and we know you just got that raise. I stood there listening to my mother ask me for $10,000 on the same day she'd missed watching me become the first person in our family to earn a graduate degree, and something inside me went very, very quiet. I'll think about it, I told her. I hung up. I looked down at my diploma. And I smiled, not the smile of a woman who'd just been hurt. The smile of a woman who'd just decided something. To understand why I smiled instead of screamed, you have to understand the shape of my family, the way you'd need a map before understanding why a road takes a strange, sudden turn. My sister Bianca was 3 years younger than me, and had been the sun our whole household orbited since the day she was born, with a head full of curls and a smile that made strangers stop on the street. I was the sturdy one, the practical one, the one my mother used to describe to her friends as so responsible, we never have to worry about her. A compliment that took me 26 years to recognize as a quiet kind of abandonment dressed up in praise. Bianca got the school trips. I got a part-time job at 15 to help cover them. Bianca got a car for her 17th birthday. I got a bus pass and a "you're better with money anyway." Bianca's engagement to a man named Trent Okafor, a sweet, soft-spoken accountant who genuinely seemed to adore her, had been celebrated with an entire family dinner, complete with my mother crying happy tears and my father giving a toast. Nobody had thrown me a dinner when I got into graduate school. Nobody had cried happy tears when I passed my licensing exam. I told myself that was fine. I told myself a lot of things were fine. That night after the graduation call, I sat in my small apartment, the one I paid for entirely on my own, the one none of them had ever once visited, and I opened my laptop and looked at my bank account. For years of overtime, for years of skipped vacations, for years of eating rice and beans so I could afford tuition without loans, I had almost $60,000 saved. $10,000 would not have broken me financially. That's the part one need you to understand. This was never about the money. It was about the voicemail. About, "You're so independent, you don't need us there like she does." About a lifetime of being handed responsibility instead of love and being told that was the same thing. My phone buzzed. A text from Bianca this time. Not my mother. "Mom said you're thinking about the wedding thing? Simi, please. This is literally my dream. You're always so good with money. You'll barely even notice it's gone, LOL. LOL. I set the phone face down on my kitchen table and sat in the dark for a long time, the ghost of that empty auditorium seat still sitting somewhere behind my ribs. Then I picked the phone back up and typed a single reply, "Give me a few days. I need to think." I wasn't lying. I did need to think. I just wasn't thinking about what they assumed I was thinking about. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in almost 2 years. I called my Aunt Patrice. Patrice was my father's older sister, a retired family court mediator with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, the kind of woman who'd been quietly disapproving of how my parents raised Bianca and me since we were children, though she'd mostly kept her opinions to herself out of some old-fashioned belief that you don't interfere in your brother's household. "You sound different," she said, the moment she picked up. What happened? I told her everything, the empty seat, the voicemail, the $10,000, the LOL. I expected sympathy. I got something better, clarity. "Simone," she said, her voice steady in the way that made you understand exactly why she'd spent 30 years in courtrooms. "How much money have you given your parents over the past 10 years? Think carefully. Add it up in your head right now." I did the math out loud, hesitant at first, then faster as the numbers kept surfacing from memory. The $1,200 for my father's truck repair, the $3,000 for Bianca's first semester of community college before she dropped out, the $800 a month I'd quietly sent for 2 years after my father lost his job, the birthday gifts, the holiday contributions, the just this once that had become a rhythm so familiar I'd stopped noticing its weight. By the time I finished, the number sitting in the air between us was close to $31,000. Patrice was quiet for a moment. "And how much have they spent celebrating you?" I didn't need to do that math. The answer was 0, and we both knew it. "Here's what I think," Patrice said slowly, "and you don't have to take my advice. But I think you've spent your whole life being the family's safety net, and safety nets don't get thanked, sweetheart. They get used. Used until they tear." Something about the word tear landed differently than I expected. Not painful. Clarifying. "I don't want to hurt them," I admitted. "I just want them to see me." "Those might not be the same goal," Patrice said gently. "Sometimes people only really see you the day you stop making yourself invisible to keep the peace." I hung up the phone an hour later with a plan starting to take shape in my mind. Not a plan for revenge. Not yet. Not exactly. A plan for something I didn't have a name for until Patrice gave me one on our way off the call. "Give them a mirror, baby," she'd said. "Not a war. A mirror. Let them see themselves for once." I wrote those words down on a sticky note and put it on my refrigerator. I had 4 days until Bianca's deposit deadline. Here is what nobody in my family knew about me. I had spent the last 2 years of graduate school quietly building a small structural consulting side business, taking on private clients' evenings and weekends, and it had grown far beyond what I'd ever expected. I wasn't just an engineer with a good salary anymore. I was, as of 11 months earlier, the sole owner of a firm worth just under $400,000 in contracts and assets, something I had told absolutely no one in my family, partly out of habit and partly, I'll admit now, out of a quiet, protective instinct I hadn't examined too closely until that week. I called my business partner, a brilliant, no-nonsense woman named Halima Yusuf, who'd been with me since the beginning and knew more about my family than anyone besides Patrice. "They want $10,000, I told her, the day after skipping my graduation. Halima didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Simone, you know I love you like a sister, so I need you to actually hear me. You have spent your whole life funding people who show up for your sister and disappear for you. What exactly are you hoping happens if you give them this money?" I didn't have an answer. "Exactly," she said. "So don't give them the money. Give them something else." That night, I did something I'd never done before in my entire adult life. I wrote everything down, every dollar I'd given, every missed birthday, every "you're so independent," every moment I'd shrunk myself so Bianca could take up all the space in the room. 9 handwritten pages, front and back. Then I called my mother. "I'll come to dinner Friday," I told her. "The whole family. I want to talk about the wedding." My mother's voice brightened instantly, relief flooding through the phone like a faucet turned on full blast. "Oh, Simone, thank you, baby. I knew you'd come through. You always do." "I always do," I repeated quietly, and something in my tone must have registered, because there was a small pause on the line before she rushed to fill it with more thanks. I hung up and looked at those 9 pages spread across my kitchen table. Friday, I decided, I wasn't coming to give them a check. I was coming to give them a mirror, exactly like Patrice said. I just didn't yet know how badly some people flinch when they finally see their own reflection. Friday dinner was held at my parents' house, the same dining room where every major family milestone had unfolded for as long as I could remember: Bianca's sweet 16, her engagement dinner, every Thanksgiving where I somehow ended up cooking half the meal while being told how helpful I was. Bianca arrived glowing, Trent trailing behind her with a hopeful, slightly nervous smile, clearly aware that money was about to be discussed and unsure of his place in the conversation. My father, Reginald, sat at the head of the table like always, saying little, the way he'd always let my mother run the emotional weather of our household while he simply nodded along with whichever direction the wind blew. So, my mother said, practically vibrating with anticipation once the plates were cleared, "You said you wanted to talk about the wedding." "I do," I said. I reached into my bag and set the 9 handwritten pages on the table, squared neatly at the edges. "But first, I want to talk about my graduation." The table went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when people sense a shift in weather they can't yet name. "Simone, we already explained," my mother started. "I know what you explained," I said, keeping my voice level, the way I'd rehearsed 100 times in my bathroom mirror that week. "Bianca had a dress fitting." "I understand that's what happened. What I want to talk about is what it revealed." I slid the pages across the table toward my mother. "This is every dollar I've given this family over the last 10 years. $31,200, give or take. I'm not asking you to pay me back. I want you to see it." My mother's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, then embarrassment, then something sharper, defensive. "Why would you keep track like that? That's not what family does." "No," I agreed. "Family doesn't keep track. Family also doesn't skip your only graduate degree ceremony for a dress fitting and then ask you for $10,000 the next morning." Bianca's face had gone pale. Trent had gone very still beside her, his eyes moving between us like he was watching a car crash he couldn't stop. "That's not fair," Bianca said, her voice small. "You know I didn't mean." "I know you didn't think about it at all," I said gently, and that was somehow worse than if I'd shouted. "That's the whole problem, Bianca. You've never had to think about me. None of you have." My father, silent until now, finally spoke. "Simone, we love you. This isn't about love." "I know," I said, and for the first time that night, my voice cracked. "That's exactly what scares me." The room held its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. "So, what do you want?" my mother asked, her voice tight, defensive walls climbing fast. "An apology? Fine. I'm sorry we missed the ceremony. There. Can we talk about the actual wedding now?" That apology, thrown across the table like loose change, told me everything I needed to know about how this dinner was going to go. "No," I said quietly. "We can't." "Excuse me?" "I'm not giving Bianca $10,000, I said, and the words landed in that dining room like a dropped plate, sharp and final. "Not because I don't have it. I have it. I could write the check right now and not feel it." "Then why?" Bianca started, tears already gathering. "Because you've never once, in 26 years, asked me how I'm doing without a request folded inside the question," I said. "Because the only time this family reaches for me is when you need something. Because I've spent a decade being the family's ATM and its afterthought in the same breath, and I only just realized how much that was costing me." My father shifted in his seat. "That's not true, Simone. We're proud of you." "Then why wasn't anyone in that auditorium?" I asked, and my voice finally broke fully, the crack I'd been holding back all week splitting wide open. "I looked for you. I kept looking, even after they called my name, even walking across that stage. I looked for you the whole time, Daddy." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in that house. My mother's eyes filled, but I didn't feel triumphant watching them. I felt hollowed out, the way you feel after finally setting down something heavy you'd carried so long you forgot it wasn't part of your own body. "I love you," I told them, and I meant it, which somehow made everything harder. "I love all of you. But I can't keep pouring from somewhere empty and calling it family. I won't be paying for this wedding. I think, actually, I need some space from all of you for a while." Bianca stood up so fast her chair scraped back and nearly toppled. "You're punishing me because you're jealous." You've always been jealous of me. There it was. The thing I think we'd both known but never said out loud, finally standing in the middle of the room where everyone could see it. No, I said softly, gathering my 9 pages back into my bag with hands that had somehow gone perfectly steady. I was never jealous of you, Bianca. I was just tired of being invisible next to you. I walked out of that house without looking back, and for the first time in years, the air outside felt like something I was breathing for myself. I want to be honest with you about the weeks that followed, because this isn't a story where the empowerment arrives instantly and stays glowing and uncomplicated. Grief doesn't work that cleanly, and neither does growth. I cried more in the 2 weeks after that dinner than I had in the previous 2 years combined. I second-guessed myself constantly, replaying the dinner on a loop, wondering if I'd been too harsh, if Patrice's mirror had actually just been cruelty wearing a gentler name. I drafted at least 6 different apology texts to my mother and deleted every single one before sending them. What kept me steady was Halima, who checked on me every single day without fail, and Patrice, who called every Sunday evening like clockwork, and, surprisingly, Trent. Bianca's fiancé reached out to me 11 days after the dinner, nervous, apologetic, asking if we could talk. We met at a small coffee shop, and he told me something that reframed the entire situation in a way I hadn't expected. Bianca and I have been fighting about the wedding for months, he admitted, turning his cup in slow circles on the table. She wanted this massive, expensive event, and I told her we couldn't afford that on our own, and I think she just assumed you'd cover the gap the way you always cover things. I don't think she thought about what that dinner would cost you. I don't think any of them think about what things cost you, honestly. I've noticed that for a while. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think you deserve to know it wasn't really about the money, he said. It was about nobody ever having to ask what you needed, because you never let them see you need anything. I sat with that for a long time after he left. He was right, in a way that unsettled me. I had spent so many years building myself into someone unshakable, someone who didn't need anything from anyone, that I had unknowingly taught my family it was safe to never wonder about my needs at all. My strength, the very thing I was proudest of, had become the wall that kept them from ever really seeing me. That didn't excuse what they'd done. But it complicated it, the way real understanding always complicates the stories we tell about the people who hurt us. For the first time since the dinner, I didn't just feel angry. I felt something closer to sad clarity, the kind that comes right before real change. 3 weeks after the dinner, my mother finally called. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen the way it had 100 times over the years, that old compulsive hope flickering even now. I answered. Simone, she said, and her voice sounded different, smaller, less certain than the confident, faucet-bright tone she'd used the night she thanked me for coming to dinner. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Okay, I said carefully. Patrice came by, she admitted, and my stomach dropped a little, wondering what my aunt had said. She didn't yell at me. I think that's what got to me the most. She just asked me one question and left. What question? My mother's breath caught audibly on the line. She asked me to name 3 things I know about your life that don't involve you helping someone else. And Simone, I sat there for 20 minutes and I couldn't answer her. Not one thing. I don't know your favorite color anymore. I don't know what you do for fun. I didn't even know the name of your business partner until Patrice told me. I felt tears rise, unexpected and hot. I don't know how to fix 26 years in one phone call, my mother continued, her voice thick. But I don't want to lose you trying to hold on to the version of this family that was never actually fair to you. I'm sorry about the ceremony, Simone. Not the version of sorry I gave you at dinner. The real one. I should have been there. You worked so hard, and I wasn't in that room, and I have to live with that. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the empty seat, or the voicemail, or the LOL text, or 26 years of quiet imbalance. But it was the first time in my adult life my mother had asked about me without a request folded somewhere inside the question. I need time, I told her honestly. I need you to actually mean this, not just this week, but in 6 months, in a year. I need to see it, not just hear it. That's fair, she said. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. We talked a little longer, carefully, like two people relearning a language they used to speak fluently and had somehow forgotten. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment, and for the first time since that empty auditorium seat, something in my chest loosened just slightly. Not healed. Not yet. But no longer holding its breath. Bianca and I didn't speak again for almost 4 months. The wedding happened without my involvement, smaller than she'd originally planned, funded by Trent's savings and a modest contribution from my parents, held at a community hall instead of the sprawling venue she'd dreamed about. I heard about it secondhand, through Patrice, through my mother's increasingly gentle updates, through a single photo my father texted me unprompted, the first unprompted text he'd ever sent me in my entire life. A picture of Bianca laughing at her own reception, radiant despite the smaller budget, with a caption that simply read, "Wish you'd been here. We miss you." I didn't go to the wedding. I wasn't invited, not really, not in the way that mattered, and I'd made peace with sitting that one out the same way they'd sat out my graduation. But 4 months later, Bianca called me herself, for the first time since the dinner. "I've been in therapy," she said, without preamble, her voice trembling slightly. "Trent suggested it. I didn't want to go at first. I thought I was going to talk about wedding stress. I ended up talking about you almost the entire first month." "Bianca, let me finish," she said, and I did. "I've spent my whole life being the favorite, Simone, and I never once asked myself what that cost you, because it never occurred to me it cost you anything. I thought love just worked that way in our family. Some people give, some people receive, and I was born on the receiving side and you were born on the giving side, and I never questioned why. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about the ceremony. I'm sorry about asking for that money the very next morning like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. I know that now." I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, tears sliding down freely, the ache in my chest finally finding somewhere honest to land. "I don't need you to fix everything today," I told her. "I just need you to keep noticing. That's all I've ever really wanted. Just to be noticed." "I'm noticing," she said. "I'm going to keep noticing. I promise." It wasn't a magic fix. Promises like that take years to prove themselves, not phone calls. But it was a beginning, fragile and real, the first true beginning our relationship had ever actually had. We talked for almost 2 hours that night, longer than we had in years, and for once, not a single request passed between us. Just two sisters finally actually talking. It's been a year now since that empty auditorium seat, since the voicemail, since the 9 handwritten pages spread across my parents' dining table like evidence in a trial nobody wanted to admit was happening. My business has grown. Halima and I brought on 2 junior engineers last spring, and I finally, for the first time in my adult life, took an actual vacation, 2 weeks in a place I chose entirely for myself, with people I chose entirely for myself, doing nothing that served anyone's needs but my own. My relationship with my family is different now, not perfect, not fully healed, but real in a way it never was before. My mother calls just to talk sometimes, actual talking, not requests wearing a conversation's clothing. My father sends me pictures of things that remind him of me, small, clumsy gestures from a man learning a new language late in life. Bianca and I have dinner once a month, just the 2 of us, and she asks about my work now, really asks, and listens to the answers. I gave a talk last month at my old university, invited by the engineering department to speak to graduating students about resilience. I told them about the empty auditorium seat. I told them about the voicemail, the $10,000, the 9 handwritten pages. I watched a few of them cry, recognizing something of their own families in the shape of my story. At the end, a young woman raised her hand and asked me the question I think everyone in that room was really there to ask. How did you know when it was time to stop giving so much of yourself away? I thought about it for a long moment before I answered. I didn't know, I told her honestly. I just got tired enough to find out. Sometimes that's what it takes, not wisdom, not a plan, just exhaustion finally outweighing the fear of disappointing people who were never going to notice the cost anyway. I told her the thing Patrice told me, the thing that changed everything. Give people a mirror, not a war. Let them see themselves clearly, even if it's the hardest thing you've ever handed someone. What they do with that reflection is up to them. It's no longer your job to hold it steady for them forever. I still have that sticky note on my refrigerator. The edges have curled slightly with time, the ink a little faded. Give them a mirror, baby. Not a war. I look at it every morning while I make my coffee, in the kitchen of the life I built entirely for myself, and I smile. The real kind now, not the kind from that parking lot a year ago. The kind that finally, fully, belongs to me. The end.